Support for this episode comes from T-Mobile. We're a lot more than just baseball fans. We're baseball fanatics. And thanks to T-Mobile, we can stay connected to the game we love with 5G in more places. T-Mobile is your ticket to the game. So whether you're home or away, you're never far from your favorite team with America's largest and fastest 5G network. Don't get caught looking. Switch to T-Mobile, the leader in 5G today. Fastest according to Open Signal Awards based on average speeds in USA 5G Experience Report, April 2021. See 5G device coverage and access details at T-Mobile.com.
Hello everyone and welcome to what is going to be a two-part episode of the Talking Chop podcast. I am your host, Brad Rowland. It's going to be episode 308 and 309. Listen to 308 right now. But obviously, it's been a big week for the Atlanta Braves, and I am joined by both of my regular co-hosts, Eric Cole and Scott Coleman, are both here. Hello, gentlemen. Fight amongst yourselves.
I am simply surprised that we didn't see any Braves arrested for public intoxication from the celebrations this week. I am very interested in talking about some of those celebrations because they were pretty great. Obviously great to see you guys, and I'm really excited to talk about baseball with you.
Yeah, what a week. I mean, this time last week, we really it was the impending waiting of what was going to be a huge series for the Braves, and what a way to close it out. And as you just said, we have a lot of good stuff to talk about. A lot of fun things happened over the last week, and here we go.
Yeah, obviously a lot to get into, and because it's kind of a luxury. It's also kind of interesting in a lot of ways because of where the Braves are. They're locked into their seating. They're locked into their matchup. They will see the Milwaukee Brewers beginning on Friday, so we kind of already have that information. Oftentimes, the three of us, or two of the three of us, will have to wait the last couple of years for a playoff opponent or some specifics. And this time around, it's the last day of the regular season, and we've known the Braves were going to play the Brewers for 3 or 4 days at this point. So no time to waste. We'll kind of get into some look back stuff on part 1 of this podcast. And then part 2, we'll spend diving into Braves Brewers because it doesn't start again until Friday, but there isn't too much that's going to change between now and then. So there's a beauty in that. There's also a lot of waiting, a lot of probably frustrated waiting if you like baseball like I do to watch it. But I guess you'll have some opportunities to watch the wild card games and other stuff in between now and then. So I guess we'll start here. The Braves obviously clinched this thing this week. That was a lot of fun, as we've all kind of referenced, and we will definitely save our full-blown season review stuff for the offseason because we just kind of have to do that for content purposes. But just to run some numbers down here and paint the picture a little bit of what transpired in the last couple of months even. This, of course, is the 4th straight division title for the Braves. When we opened this podcast, Carlos and I, and then Eric and Scott later on, they were not winning a lot when we started this podcast. And the last 4 years, they have now been quite good. This is the 21st division title for the Atlanta Braves. That is the most by any Major League Baseball team in the division era. And this one was crazy in a lot of ways. As we talked about a lot, just to refresh everybody's memories, though, they were trailing by 4.5 games in the National League East. They were in third place at 52 and 55 on the morning of August 3rd. That's 2 months ago today. They were, again, 4.5 games out of first and in third place in the National League East. Then they won 16 of the next 18 games, turning a 4.5 game deficit into a 4.5 game lead in 20 days. A 9-game swing in 20 days. And then after they leveled off a little bit, they put one more finishing kick together. They won 10 out of 11 from September 19th to September 30th to put the division away. And when that run actually began, they were only up by a half game. They were leading, but the lead it kind of dwindled a little bit. There was some fear, at least in my soul, along the way there. But that finishing kick put it together. So basically, as we've kind of talked about a lot on this podcast, there was those 2 big runs this season, and that was all they kind of needed to win the division. It wasn't always pretty. It wasn't always fun, honestly, along the way. But the big picture, taking a step back, it was pretty awesome to see them scratch and claw and remake the team midseason and all of that stuff. So we'll get into what happened this week, but I want to just sort of lay the groundwork there to start with. Scott, was this season as weird for you as it was for me? Because it was kind of strange and not a bad way, just kind of a weird way.
Yeah, it's a testament to the team, and I think Brian Snitker and Freddie Freeman both talked about this. after they clinched on Thursday night about how there were a lot of ups and a lot of downs. And this was maybe the sweetest division title. They just alluded to them winning 4 in a row, which is actually, now that the Dodgers did not win the West today against the Giants, the Braves now have the longest active division championship streak of 4 years, which is really remarkable, especially in this day and age of baseball where there's so much parity and teams going up and down. But yeah, it's a testament to the clubhouse and the players for sticking with it the entire way. And when they lost Ronald Acuna just before the All-Star break, on this podcast, we talked about, what does this team have left? Do they have both the mental and even just frankly the talent to overcome this? They lost, of course, Marcell Ozuna early in the year. They never had Mike Soroka at any point. They were down Travis d'Arnaud for most of the year. They were down Huascar Ynoa for most of the year. It was just one thing after another in the first half, and we always kind of hoped this team was going to find itself along the way, and thankfully they did. And just the front office and Alex Anthopoulos just crushed the trade deadline to put this team in a position to win. And as you said, they, when they needed to win, they found a way to win, and they put together that streak in early August. And then over the last 2 weeks or so, they have played so well when it mattered most, when they needed every single game. And it's been a lot of fun, and especially once they've gotten past their early season woes. As a fan and as someone who writes and talks about the team pretty regularly, this has been a special season.
Yeah, it's definitely been a special season. I still think that the 2018 title was the sweetest, just because of like the years that they were coming off of. Like even up until like they clinched, we were all just like, when's this, this isn't really happening? Are we sure it's going to happen? They were so young then. And, like seeing, Ronnie catch the final out after coming off a great rookie season. And like that, for me, that was a little bit sweeter. And this one, when we were talking about it, when all three of us were talking, or, if it was just me or just Scott, like, when Ronnie got hurt, I mean, it felt generous to give them a 10% chance of making the playoffs. And I think we all talked about, like, like even if the Braves go on a run, they're going to have to get some help. Fortunately, they got some help, because I don't think I've seen a team crater quite as badly as the Mets did in the second half, but that was impressive. They were absolutely awful. I would pick the Marlins most of the time in a matchup with them in a series right now. They're playing that bad. And between that and, the Phillies made something like basically match the Braves runs in a lot of ways. The Braves got the division lead, but then once the Phillies got their easier schedule and the Braves had to play some tougher games, that made it where it was a little bit like, like they made up some ground. But I mean, when the Braves played the Phillies, it was pretty clear that they were the better team. And that's a testament to both these players. I mean, like, I don't think any of us here, I love Austin Riley more than most. I'm not surprised by all the power numbers. I would have lost all the money in my bank account betting on him hitting 300 in a season. And when you get that from that guy, and you get Freddie kind of running back into form, then you get, like those hot stretches you get from Dansby sometimes. He had put together a couple of those. Ozzy's kind of the same way. And then you got those contributions from those guys that Alex Anthopoulos made at the trade deadline. I don't know if he will win it, but he deserves the Executive of the Year, because, was the Rich Rod acquisition something that was like, sure, he faded down the stretch in terms of overall, like, like how much he's performed, and, some of those peripherals were scary, maybe, but he still gave them some good bullpen performances when they really needed him right after the trade deadline, even if he faded a little bit. And all these offensive pieces, I mean, sure, are they kind of platoon pieces that you kind of move around your lineup, based on matchups and things like that? Yeah, there's not like a game, they didn't get like a 10-time All-Star, like big dollar acquisition at the trade deadline, but they just got guys that can play and have real utility. And, Jorge Soler, Eddie Rosario, Adam Duvall, they might have their warts, but they filled a very important niche on this team. Whereas when Freddie and Austin weren't going wild, you didn't have to hope that it was a hot streak for Ozzy or a hot streak for Dansby to get the offense going, because those guys, they consistently change games with some of their at bats. They're just big power bats that would just hit big home runs when they needed them, and that was the difference in the season for them, because they won close games that they were losing, and that was because they were getting that little bit of a boost of an offense. It was, again, really good to see. really, really exciting. Again, I would pick Alex Anthopoulos to win the, executive of the year. I think that Snicker should be in the running for manager of the year, not necessarily because of his tactical decisions, but I mean, keeping a team together and motivated like this, that's no joke. And, we make jokes about, lineup construction and, bullpen moves and who he's using and why he's using his continued reliance on Will Smith in situations that he seems a lot of times not always the best option for. One thing that guy is really good at is that keeping his teams motivated and wanting to play and hungry, and that has real value. And considering where the Braves were going like into the trade deadline, like he deserves some recognition for that. So props to those guys. It was a really, really fun season. Definitely a weird one. I'm not sure if I would call it a good surprise in the sense that to get to where we are now, it's not something that was necessarily a lot of good things happened. But overall, like really, really satisfying to see him. And this is a team that I could see making a run if some certain things go right.
Yeah, I think that's all right. And a couple things that I remember / was looking up in advance of this podcast about how things have changed. And we definitely didn't totally bury the Braves with Acuna out, but I think everyone, including us, referenced how unlikely it was going to be that they made this run. And yeah, they got some help, to be sure. The division, let's be frank, the Braves have the worst record of any playoff team in either league this year. It wasn't as if they finished the season with 97 wins and they had this magical run. I mean, they were great and they had a great run at the end of the season, but they do have the worst record in the playoffs anywhere. So it's not like they were dominant. But at the same time, this is the craziest stat for me. Not only factoring everything in, but with Acuna going out the day that he got hurt, they were 44-44, and the rest of the season they won at a 97.6 win clip. That's insane. It's not even that.
Yeah, that's wild.
I mean, and they kind of had to. I mean, that's even with as bad as New York cratered and Philly was never that impressive, they still had to win at a 90+ win clip without either their best or second best player, however you think about Ronald Acuna, without their MVP frontrunner early in the season. And all the other stuff. And, the deadline definitely helped. We talked about it a lot, but it's worth just saying again how much they remade the team. But, the odds of that happening, I'm looking it up now, I think it was on the day or maybe the day after Acuna went down, the projection systems were like in the teens and 20s for the Braves to make the playoffs, much less win the division. The division was even lower than that because the wild card was still like more of an option at that point in time. And, they did have some help, but they also took care of their own business along the way. So we should always be talking about that in the grand scheme, because it really is crazy the way that things changed between the months and days of a long season. I will just say I think Tuesday's game this week, and we're not going to talk about games in too much detail this week because obviously a lot of them didn't matter, but Tuesday's game was like kind of a microcosm of the season in a lot of ways, because it was a huge win. They had to have it, and they basically put this, in my mind, it was kind of over. It wasn't all the way over after Tuesday night, but that one put them from 2.5 games up to 3.5 games up, and essentially put their projections to like the high 90s range. But it also wasn't easy at any point. Like, Charlie Morton was great, and then you had the 9th inning adventure with Eddie Rosario. I tweeted this, but I'm very glad that we do not know what the Eddie Rosario game is at this point in time. But if they lose that game and then lose the division, that goes down in history forever with him dropping the line drive in left field. That was like a microcosm because that was excruciating at points. Will Smith was not great in that game once again. You got some great pitching from guys who anchored you all season long, and this time it was Charlie Morton. But I guess I'll go back to Eric first, as I went to Scott first last time. But it really did feel like everything wrapped into about 4 hours of this season. Ended up with a positive result, but some roller coasters along the way.
Yeah, to be sure. They get 2 runs to take an early lead, and Morton was so great. Will Smith and Eddie Rosario were not. And it was, the Will Smith adventures over the last week of the season I could have done without, and just in general. It wasn't simply just that appearance. It was others too, the Rosario dropped ball was obviously bad, but at the same time, it's not like Will Smith was making anyone's life easier that night. Just in terms of hard hit balls and, base runners. And it's just, again, a lot more interesting than it needed to be. But at the same time, the going into the Philly series, the nightmare scenario and, full stop was the Phillies sweeping, because then all of a sudden they have to, like, they might go into a series against a New York Mets team where there's a lot of like animosity. Like the Mets weren't going to be interested in, making it easy for the Braves in the last series of the series season, especially if their season was on the line. So that was the nightmare scenario. And when you lose the game that is started by Zach Wheeler, who has been really, really good this year, and he was really good in that game too. Morton outpitched him, but Wheeler didn't make it easy, and he kind of fell into a groove there where it just felt like it was concerning in that you just didn't know if 2 runs was going to be enough to win the game. But the biggest thing in the series for me is just like Bryce Harper did nothing. And that was the biggest part of, like, in that game where it was a really close game, when you have a guy who's like trying to vie for an MVP award and who is really, really good and has not exactly, struggled against the Braves in his career, particularly when Julio Teheran was on the mound. It was that was legitimately scary, but they handled Bryce really well. They just never let any of these guys get anything going offensively in the entire series. And it kind of started with that game, and they set the tone that they know who in that lineup could beat them, and they didn't let them beat them. Overall, like, and I'm with you. It's like, as soon as I saw that they won that game, you just start looking, and you're like, I just don't see, like, the path that the Phillies are going to have to take is significantly more difficult to try to catch up with the Braves now, because then you have to like really kind of hope that the Braves just completely flame out the last week. And the way they've been playing, I just didn't see that happening.
Yeah, I think, Zach Wheeler has been as good as anybody this year. So you look back at that game, you got a huge hit early on from Jorge Soler, who has just been money, especially over the last month. Every time the Braves have won, it feels like Jorge Soler has been involved somehow. And then again, to tip our hats to Charlie Morton. He has been everything and more that you could have possibly hoped for when signing him to a 1-year deal this past offseason. He's been so steady. He's that veteran presence, I think, in the rotation that, over the last couple of seasons, the Braves just haven't had, or at least someone as dominant as Morton, someone who is going to start game 1 of the NLDS, a guy who you feel confident with every single time. And then, of course, that has effects on all the other guys in the rotation. And you think about this team down the road as one that could make some noise in the postseason because they have Charlie Morton. He struck out 10 across 7 innings on Tuesday night. You knew that he needed to be at the very top of his game because Zach Wheeler was the other guy on the mound that night. And to Morton's credit, he was great. I think he gave up singles to the first 2 batters of the game, and after that, only allowed 1 hit and 2 walks over the next 7 innings combined. So he was tremendous. And again, as we look back on this season and look ahead to the playoffs, it's hard to imagine the Braves being in this spot without Charlie Morton and how good he has been.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to get into a couple of things in terms of like some look back stuff on Morton and Austin Riley's breakout and all that fun stuff, because there's a lot to get to. But first, a word from our sponsors on the show today.
Thanks to T-Mobile for supporting this episode and for keeping baseball fans around the country connected to the game. Because when you're on America's largest and fastest 5G network, you get more than great coverage. You get to stay close to your favorite team, whether you're at home or on the road. In other words, T-Mobile is your ticket to the game. Make the switch to T-Mobile, the leader in 5G today. Fastest according to Open Signal Awards based on average speeds and USA 5G Experience Report, April 2021. See 5G device coverage and access details at T-Mobile.com.
This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Football is back, and the best bet you can make is downloading the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It doesn't matter if you're new to gambling or an old pro, FanDuel has something for everyone. And as an official sports betting partner of the NFL, you know your bets are safe. There's also never been a better time to use FanDuel, because right now, you'll get up to $1,000 back if your first bet doesn't win. You can even turn a small wager into a big payday with a same-game parlay bet. Just sign up with the promo code SPOTIFY to place your first bet risk-free on FanDuel Sportsbook. Download FanDuel today. 21 plus and present in Virginia. First online real money wager only. Refund issued as non-withdrawable site credit that expires in 14 days. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER.
All right, before we get into some of the like big picture look back stuff, and again, we're going to save our full review thoughts for a couple of months from now, hopefully, if you're a Braves fan, and we'll be talking about stuff in December. But a few more quick news and notes. First of all, we have a newsbreaker among us with Eric Scoops Cole, who continues to break news. What, daily now? Are you going to be like the new Ken Rosenthal? Eric,
Just call me the Woj of Braves minor league baseball. I'm in for it. Yeah, absolutely.
So
You can count on me.
I was happy. All joking aside, I was happy to see you get credited by Bowman and others for the scoop on Spencer Strider coming up. If everybody missed this, Eric was the one that broke the news that Strider was going to be coming up to the Braves. That was cool to see, not only because you work hard, but because you actually got recognition for it. That doesn't always happen for people that don't always break news. So congrats on that. And I joked about it, but it was cool.
Yeah, it was awesome. Everyone was like super, like, again, I wasn't going around begging for it, and more importantly, I had it well before a lot of other folks, so it wasn't like I felt any
Eric.
sort of
Yeah.
well, I did, but at the same time, getting that sort of recognition from a guy like Bowman, who, like, not only I respect a ton, I'm amongst the Braves beat writers, you will struggle to find anyone better than Bo. But in my limited experience with, like, covering the team and, like, actually being in the press box, like, one of the nicest, most welcoming people too, and to see him both, like, recognize the report was out there and to actually, like, run it down, and he got the confirmation to, again, that lends legitimacy to the report and all that stuff. I was very comfortable with the sourcing on it, but at the same time, it felt good to be recognized for it. And, seeing my name on MLB trade rumors is definitely one of the weirder things I'm going to ever experience in my life, or at least starting off for now anyway. But it was really cool. I was really happy for Spencer too. He's been incredibly good down there in the minor leagues. Was really, really impressive. That fastball is something else. I'm really surprised he hasn't recorded his first major league strikeout yet, but he's basically faced it all lefties so far, which is, interesting usage, but at the same time against the Mets, you can't really avoid it. So it was certainly made my week a lot more interesting than I was planning on being going into the week. But at the same time, it was really rewarding, and I was happy to break the news for everybody.
Yeah, there you go on that. That was definitely fun. And the rest of the stuff from the weekend, I mean, it was funny and the jokes were good when Freddie Freeman sat on Friday after they clinched on Thursday because of the now infamous article with Freddie, who does not enjoy resting. As we all have known for a long time, but there was the Yahoo article about Freddie and rest, and he took the first day off after they clinched, which I definitely appreciated. They sort of spread it out with Freddie and Dansby sitting on Friday, and then Ozzie and Riley on Saturday. Bullpen game is kind of just like punting it to get the rest of get the season over with. Basically, Morton threw 2 2/3 today. There was a 118 mile an hour home run from Jorge Soler on Sunday. That's worth pointing out. But other than that,
it was destroyed.
Yeah,
I'm surprised that ball didn't just like disintegrate once he hit it.
It was wild. But other than that, I guess I'll go back to Thursday. I'll be honest. I was traveling. I was in a wedding this weekend and did not actually get a chance to watch much of Thursday Live, which is unfortunate. I did get a chance to go back and watch some of the post game stuff later on. But Scott, I guess we'll start there because that was when they clinched, and I thought it was fitting that it was an 8-pitch save by Will Smith, who was just actually good for once on Thursday night. That was fun. What stood out to you guys? I mean, my personal thing was Guillermo Heredia with the swords and all of that.
not even close. Guillermo was the star.
He's so good. But I guess we'll start with Scott. What stands out to you about Thursday? Because obviously it was celebration and pretty raucous, as we talked about earlier in the podcast.
Yeah. So here's my question: if you had to party, like post-game party after winning a division with anyone on the roster right now, would it be Guillermo? Would it be Luke Jackson? Would it be Jock Peterson, who we got to bring up? Jock was wearing somebody's pearl necklace during
for reasons no one understands. And he's just like, he's like, I just was wearing them.
Yeah.
He's also got a lot of praise. I mean, all joking aside, like he's got a lot of positive press from people, like, and I think with good reason, about just like loosening up the clubhouse. Like apparently Jock Peterson's been fantastic in the room with those guys. Like lots of credit being given to him, which I'm not sure I even knew that, but he seems like a good guy, vibes guy for sure.
He does, and he, of course, he has not played as much over the last 6 weeks or so with the additions of all those other outfielders, but he played some really important games and some important at bats in the first couple weeks of August as the team started to find its footing. For me, I think closing out the series with the sweep of the Phillies on Thursday was big for a variety of reasons. For me, it was knowing that it was over. You did not need to risk anyone going hard on over the weekend. You were not suddenly relying on the Miami Marlins to beat the Phillies at all. Thought they did beat the Phillies twice this weekend, which is pretty funny. And as we just mentioned a little while ago, that the Mets, if they had a chance to spoil the Braves season, they were going to come in and give it everything they had. So to eliminate those possibilities entirely, wrap it up on Thursday, give everybody a day or two off over the weekend, line up your bullpen, line up your rotation. For all of those reasons, it was really, really important to wrap this thing up. And what a great way to be able to celebrate on the field with the Phillies in the opposing dugout. That's always a little sweet too. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, of course, there were no fans last year, but I believe they've clinched the division now in 3 of the 4 years at home. Is that right? I mean, it's always, as a player, I would imagine it's a little sweeter to be able to celebrate in your own dugout with your family and everything like that. But I think, to correct me if I'm wrong here, I'll look this up. They've been able to clinch at home every year during these 4 years of division titles, which is, I guess, a cherry on top.
I honestly don't know. So maybe Eric does, but
so 2018 for sure, and this year obviously for sure. I think 2019 may have been in Chicago. That for whatever reason, I think that they were at Wrigley for that. Sure. And then 2020.
Yeah,
they went. I know that the battery exploded when they clinched out.
That's
there.
right.
So yeah. So 3 out of 4 sounds right. I think it might have been in Chicago. Now to answer the question you posed, Scott, that who I'd rather party with, I'm pretty sure the answer is Guillermo for a number of reasons. One, he seems like really fun. I would need to give him a good 5-foot radius because he swings those swords around, which is a little bit concerning considering the amount of drinking that was involved. But I also know that guy is going to find wherever the fun is. Whereas I could see like Jock having kind of like fun in like his spot. You know what I mean? Like he was kind of like smoking a cigar in the dugout and he was just doing his thing at times. And like Luke Jackson, he'll have like where he's partying, whether it be like climbing into the fountain and then watching Will Smith struggling desperately to try to get into the fountain and almost failing to do so. But like Guillermo's going to find all of those things because he's just going to be everywhere. That when he busted in on Jorge Soler's interview and behind him when it was on live TV was hysterical. Ozzy Albies being so hammered and tired that he let an F-bomb loose on live TV, and then asking Paul Bird to redo it, and Paul's trying to explain to him that they're live.
We're live.
He's like, yeah, that's it was a lot of fun to watch. It love seeing guys being able to celebrate something like that. The series itself, you couldn't have asked for it to go better. When your starters they average 2 runs a game against them. Like that gives you a really good chance to win games. And, and like hats off to the bullpen too. Like again, Will Smith making things more interesting than they need to be at times was a little bit frustrating, but at the same time, when they needed to get outs, they got them. Luke Jackson's been amazing. And I would, again, not have guessed that happening going into the season, especially when like the loss of the sticky stuff and people were thinking that maybe he might be a casualty of that. He just looked better than he had been, pre the sticky stuff ban. So, the bullpen did their job, pitching did their job, and the offense, which I think is a really important thing kind of going into the playoff series against the Brewers, is, you don't want to be, winning like a bunch of 3-2 games and then going against one of the better pitching staffs in the playoffs in the Brewers. You want your bats to be, you want to be swinging the bat well, and you want to be at least, feel like guys are pretty dialed in. And it seems like that this offense is dialed in because they were beating up they didn't beat up Wheeler necessarily, but looks like that they're doing well. They did well against the Mets and they did well against the Phillies. So that was the thing I kind of took away, is that once they won that first game, I felt really good about their division chances. And then they really kind of just blew out the rest of the week, taking 2 out of 3 against the Mets and sweeping the Phillies. So, when they're hitting the ball well, they're playing well, they're pitching really well, and they seem really loose and excited, and they actually get a little bit of rest too. I mean, it was a fantastic week, and the celebration stuff. Of all the celebrations, other than, again, like after that 2018 season where everyone was just like, finally we got another one, and it was a kind of a different set of emotions, like this one was really, really fun to watch.
Yeah, that's well said. And I'm not sure what my answer would be. I'm more of a low key guy in general. I'm not sure I can handle Guillermo in general, but it was fun to watch on TV.
Just follow him around and observe. Like you don't have to don't get swords out. You're asking for trouble if you're trying to match him. Like I don't. Oh, no, that's not a good idea.
Not a chance. I'd have to people watch. I think it probably one of the bench coaches would be who I would actually want to just vibe with. I think because I'm old. But no, it was Brad and Walt Weiss. Exactly. Yeah. Ron Washington, something like that would be good for me.
I don't know. Ron might be there with Guillermo.
Ron goes hard. That's true. Ron is not shy, but regardless, I mean, it was so much fun to watch, and we talked about it. You know, the roller coaster ride. They all felt it. I mean, some of the quotes too, like just how to keep that thing together and be excited and be dialed in and really grind. I mean, they had to win a lot of games in that back half of the season to get this done, and they managed to do it. We'll stay abroad. We talked about it a little bit, but I mean, the offense helped them all year long. But when you take out Ronnie and Ozuna, they basically had the 3 stars all season long. You had Freeman, you had Albies, and you had Austin Riley having his breakout. And we talked around it, but Riley, I mean, what were the odds of Riley not only hitting 300 for the season, which I think was astronomical, hitting 303 after the way he started the season is even crazier, because he hit like 320 plus after the first like 3 weeks of the season. Like, that's how crazy good he was the rest of the way. And I'm not, the MVP stuff was kind of funny. Like, he never was really in the top 2 or 3 in the MVP race, despite the way the broadcast talked about him. But at the same time, like, he really is going to get top 10, top 5 maybe MVP votes from people, and that was not on the board coming into the year. So those 3 guys, then you get 30 combined home runs from Duvall and Soler post All-Star break, and not even playing every day for those guys. That's how crazy those were. And then even Rosario got hot late in the season. So, I mean, the offense was definitely was key. I mean, they kind of had key stuff on every level, but given what we knew about no Ronnie for half the season and no Ozuna for most of the season, to score 790 runs, they finished 3rd in the National League in runs scored. That is pretty impressive, and it's sort of, I would say, an across-the-board credit, but definitely the 3 stars at the top.
Yeah, and it's just a testament to, I mean, look, Freddie didn't start the season off well either, right? Like, you know what I mean? No. What he had to get his numbers to, getting back to, basically looking like Freddie again. Maybe it wasn't quite as crazy as it was in 2020, but it was, still very, very good and just ultra consistent. And when you got those additions, whether it be, Jorge Soler, leadoff hitter extraordinaire in front of him, and then getting on base or hitting home runs and clearing them to make it easier on Freddie. And then you have Austin being able to, once Freddie was, maybe, hitting more doubles and singles and, maybe hitting a bunch of home runs, but Riley was like making him run those bases, and Albies got put in a better spot, and he was had some really good stretches for the Braves. The whole infield was really just insane this year. If Dansby Swanson's your worst infielder in a given offensive season, given the season that he put together, you're in really good shape. So, and it's just nice that when you have guys that, maybe if like your 1 through 4 guys aren't doing, aren't getting it done, but you still have guys lower in your lineup, depending on the matchups. I mean, like Adam Duvall will just win baseball games sometimes. He just like flips a switch and he'll just drive in 5 runs, and then that's all you need from that game. So it's just, again, it's a really, really kind of wild season, and the tone was dictated by, Alex Anthopoulos saying, hey, we need to make these moves. We think that if we get enough pieces, we can stitch together something. And he went out and got exactly the right pieces that they had to, and especially for what they gave up for them.
Well, and I think too, what makes this lineup just so good is it's 1 through 8. Every single player can put the ball over the fence. I think that's what we saw last year, even in the shortened season. Every single guy, you talk about Adam Duvall single-handedly winning you a game. I think you can really go up and down this lineup, and every single player can be the hero on any given night. And that was not the case earlier in the season. I mean, I think Guillermo and Abraham Almonte, those guys deserve a little bit of credit for the way they filled in with the loss of Ozuna and Acuna. But frankly, they have limitations to their games, and no one expected them to be all-stars by any means. But I think seeing the additions of Eddie Rosario, a left-handed bat, I think for the middle of the order has been really, really beneficial to help balance that out a little bit. And then, as you just said, 30 home runs in basically 2 months from Adam Duvall and Jorge Soler. That does a lot for an offense, and that quick strike ability. I think if there's one thing you can point to with this lineup, it is reliant on the home run ball, and you hope that's going to continue and be successful in the playoffs. That remains to be seen, of course. But I think the quick strike ability, sure, it's fun to watch an inning where you have 5 singles and you just run everyone around the bases, but that ability to put the ball over the fence at any given time is so valuable, and was a lot of fun to watch this year.
Absolutely, and we're going to talk about the pitching stuff too when we get into the series preview in part 2 of this. But obviously Morton all year, and Fried in the last 2 months has like a 1.5 ERA, which is just madness. And they kind of had to patch it together. Drew Smiley in and out of the rotation. It gets hurt. Anderson was like solid but not incredible, and also missed some time. And they had to piece it together, and it worked out very well, anchored by those two guys. And even the bullpen was not incredible at times this year, but they had enough depth to where it didn't kill them. And we can get into that as well when we get to the series preview. But obviously a full team effort. It's hard for me to honestly know how good they are, and that might sound funny, but it's because it's such a different team, and they've had these segments of the season where I said it earlier, but they're like a 98 win pace the last 2.5-3 months. But at the same time, it's like I don't know what their actual true talent level is on this roster because of where they are in the division and all that stuff. But we know they're pretty good. We know they're feisty. The numbers seem to think that they're definitely live to make a run in this playoff setting. So plenty to get into. Before we get into the playoff series, sort of playoff preview and part 2 of this podcast, any final thoughts, at least for now? Again, we'll come back to it later, but any final thoughts from either one of you guys on the regular season, because it's obviously full speed ahead now into the playoffs.
This, especially the last 2 months or so, have been so much fun to watch. And I think I'll be the first one to say there were a lot of really frustrating moments in the first half of the year, and nights where you just think to yourself, man, I just don't know if they're going to figure this thing out. And credit to the team. I'm thankful. And that there was a lot of talk this week. I wanted to at least bring this up about, well, the Braves won the division, but they only won the division because the Mets and the Phillies weren't any good. And while that is technically true, I do think it's worth pointing out these things always balance out. 2 years ago, the National League East was probably the best division in baseball. Braves won 97 games. The Nationals had their crazy run and won the World Series. The Mets won like 88 games and just missed a playoff spot. The Phillies won 83 games. So yes, they took advantage of the division, and that's credit to them. Anybody else could have taken advantage of this poor division and won the division and gone to the postseason. But it really was just fun to see not only the Braves figure things out in August and September, but to also watch the Phillies and the Mets collapse just despite their massive payrolls and all of the preseason expectations they get year in and year out. It was doubly sweet to see their downfall while Atlanta finally figured some things out. And by all accounts, this was a really easy team to root for as well, and a lot of fun personalities. And it made for a really, really great year.
Yeah, and I don't want to, again, harp too much on the divisional stuff, because something that's worth kind of keeping in mind is that the Braves had a hand in the rest of the division being bad. They played the division really, really well. You know what I mean? Like when you go 45-31 against the East, one of the reasons that the East doesn't look, I mean, obviously these teams were a little bit, this was certainly a weaker division. There's no questioning that. But one of the reasons why that they kind of ended up with winning the division by 6.5 games is because they were beating up on the other teams in the division. They did their job against those teams. And so the Braves deserve a certain amount of credit for that. You know what I mean? The thing that was almost maddening the most maddening is just had really, really struggled in extra innings, struggled in 1-run games and things like that. But some of that just comes down to just some bad luck situations too. This team could have very easily, just with a few bounces going their way as opposed to them not going their way, particularly in the first half of the season, they could have won this division by 13 games. And that's not counting things like Ronald Acuna being out for half the season and, Mike Soroka not pitching a game, or, Marcell Ozuna, first not hurting himself and 2 not being under indictment. So I agree that the division was weaker, but at the same time, considering everything this team had to go through, losing the quality of players they lost, in addition to the quantity of the players they lost, and they still managed to stitch this together, it speaks a lot to their character. And I think that it bodes well for them kind of going forward, especially going into the playoffs.
I agree. And I think it's a good place to leave it for now. So obviously we have celebrated the season to this point in time. We will again spend more time looking back on the regular season and the playoffs as we get into the offseason, whenever that may actually arrive. But for now, that will do it for our look back segment and this podcast of part 1. So if you're listening to this show all the way to the end, thank you for joining us. And part 2 should be on your feeds basically at the same time. So that would be all Braves Brewers talk with the 3 of us talking about the playoff series, which begins on Friday. So please stay tuned for that. Click over, subscribe, tell your friends. Thanks to Scott, thanks to Eric, and we'll be right back with part 2 of this podcast.
Support for this episode comes from T-Mobile. We're a lot more than just baseball fans. We're baseball fanatics. And thanks to T-Mobile, we can stay connected to the game we love with 5G in more places. T-Mobile is your ticket to the game. So whether you're home or away, you're never far from your favorite team with America's largest and fastest 5G network. Don't get caught looking. Switch to T-Mobile, the leader in 5G today. Fastest according to Open Signal Awards based on average speeds in USA 5G Experience Report, April 2021. See 5G device coverage and access details at T-Mobile.com.